Anybody who tries to change society without examining the family is trying to push a shadow without moving a statue. Stefan Molyneux. Yes, it is true. The world famous anime called Naruto is about childhood abuse. And I guarantee you that the arguments you're going to hear in this video will not only change the way that you see that Naruto the anime, but also drastically change the way that we see childhood and the raising of children. A few disclaimers. Number one, I am not a therapist, nor am I a psychiatrist. What I am, though, is a very huge Naruto fan and someone who went through years of therapy, journaling, and seeking self-knowledge. So through this journey, not only did I gain a great understanding of myself, but I also developed a unique skill set of listening and connecting the dots regarding other people's lives. Because when you have a deep and intimate understanding of yourself, you can connect on a more deep and intimate level with others. The three most important words are not "I love you." The three most important words are "tell me more," as it shows a genuine interest and desire to truly want to understand the other person. Let's take a look at the creator of Naruto first. Because when examining works of art, I don't think we should completely detach the artist himself from his work, but rather look at them both as having a symbiotic relationship. The creator of Naruto did an interview with the LA Times where he stated that I was born a poor student, but unlike Naruto, I was the type of poor student who gave up easily and pondered things that weren't worth pondering. Looking at what he said, that he would ponder things that weren't worth pondering, that statement tells me that the adults in his life took no interest or enjoyment in his thoughts, preferences as a child. Now let me explain. It may seem a little far-fetched, but let me explain. When you see people who are very awkward, right, very self-conscious, who are afraid or hesitant to communicate with others, in fears that they will be taking up space or time, is because they feel unimportant. This comes from their upbringing where they had to self-erase in order to be in the presence of their caretakers or parents when they were children. Because having and displaying any preferences, opinions, feelings, or desires was seen as an inconvenience to the self-absorbed narcissistic adults who raised them. Now, the creator of Naruto in his interview with the LA Times also said that he, Naruto, was created and based on my self-image of my own childhood, but different from how I really was. Being that he was born and raised in Japan, we need to understand that the Japanese culture is one that evolves around discipline, hard work, and excellence. And unfortunately, this comes at the expense of the individual. Japanese society expects people to hide their true feelings and opinions in many circumstances in order to keep what's called in Japan harmony safe. Now, I would make the assumption based on that statement that the creator of Naruto made about pondering, Naruto's mischief, bad behavior, and defiance came from two places. Number one, it gave the creator of Naruto an outlet to express his rebelliousness in a way that was appropriate in the context of Japanese culture, doing it in a fictional world with a fictional character. And number two, Naruto's parents in the actual story. Naruto grew up without his parents. The negative psychological effects of an absent parent takes a great toll on a child. Previous research has suggested that long-term separation from parents or a parent has the following adverse effects: depression, loneliness, anxiety, anger, behavioral problems at school, low academic achievement, motivation, lack of self-esteem, misbehavior, truancy, and stealing. There is no way you can look at these effects of absent parents and tell me that it does not match Naruto's behavior, especially during the beginning of the manga and anime, to a T. The 9 tails that was sealed inside of Naruto by his father is a representation of the hurt, pain, and trauma of being raised alone without his parents. Like most boys, the misbehavior of Naruto as a child was simply a cry for help. But people in the village, just like adults in the real world, won't come to the help or defense of children. In fact, in the anime, the village hated and shunned Naruto. Why? Because his father trapped the 9 tails inside of him when he was an infant. Think about that. Now, here's a dark, dirty little secret from society. Why does the trauma experienced by a child persist into adulthood? Well, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you. The reason that the trauma that we experience as a child continues to exist and affect us into our adulthood is because everyone is in on the abuse. Yes, you heard that correctly. Society is in on the abuse. Not only is everyone in on the abuse, but the abusers are protected in society. Look at the Hidden Leaf village in Naruto. The village attacks Naruto, the child, but praises the father, right? Who decided to seal the 9 tails fox demon inside of his infant child, his son. Now think about that. So you love, as a father, you love your infant child so much that you are going to seal a literal demon inside of him? Does that sound like fatherly love to you? To me, this is no different than when a father who leaves his children and is later on confronted about it says, well, I had to leave. Your mother was abusive, crazy. I left for my own sanity. So let me get this straight. You decided as a grown-ass man to abandon your children because you couldn't deal with a woman that you claim is insane and abusive. Yet, you think that a child that doesn't have half the freedoms that you did as an adult and also doesn't have the mental capacity that you had as an adult can deal with that kind of woman? Come on, let's be serious now. Let's be serious. You see, the way the Hidden Leaf village treated Naruto is very much the same way abused children are treated in the real world. Because if an abused child tells a family member that he or she is being abused by another family member, what usually happens? What usually happens? Do they get upset at the abuser that's abusing the child? No, of course not. They get mad at the child for even daring to bring this up to their attention. And this is because the majority of people are fucking cowards. When you give them a chance to show their courage in the face of evil, you expose their cowardliness to themselves. They will hate and despise you for that, which is why they will attack and blame the child, but not the actual abuser, the person that's actually abusing the child. And this is the hypocrisy that society throws at abused children. So when a wife is being abused by her husband, everyone will encourage that woman to leave her husband. But when an adult who was abused by his parents as a child is being mentally and emotionally abused by them still, society will tell them, but she's your mother, right? Oh, but he's your, but that's your father. They raised you. So, all right. So I just want to understand this. So let me get this straight. An adult woman who enters a contract of marriage voluntarily, which states till death do us part, all right, through sickness and in health, right, she can break that contract. Not only can she break that contract, but society will praise and encourage her to do so. But when an adult who is being abused by his parents that he didn't choose and never signed any contracts, because children can't sign contracts, well, he needs to stick it out, right? He needs to stay in that abusive relationship because two people had sex to create him. Therefore, he's obligated to endure any abuse and wrongdoing coming from them. Really? Really? Is that true? Is that true? This is why I say that society is in on the abuse and why the trauma persists into our adulthood, because there is no acknowledgement of wrong or evil doing. Since there is no acknowledgement of that any evil has been done, you can never heal from it. And since you can't express your hurt through words, it will just manifest itself through behavior. More specifically, self-sabotaging behavior, which will end up with the person dealing only with the symptoms of the problem, but never the actual root cause. And where there is pain and a lack of self-knowledge, there is also an enormous lack of love. And where there's a void or lack of love, we try to fill it or replace it with status. This is why Naruto wanted to become the Hokage, which is the leader of the village. He wanted to be acknowledged, believing that gaining status will fill that void or lack of love in his life. And when we do this in the real world, wanting to become famous or rich, foolishly believing that status will complete us or make us happy, spoiler alert, okay, spoiler alert, it won't. Love can never be replaced with status because there is no external solution for the internal problem of insecurity. You see, neglect, the greatest harm that can be inflicted on a child, second only to being essayed as a child. Naruto experienced an extreme amount of neglect by not having his parents, and also by the treatment he received from the villagers. The image you're currently seeing right now on your screen are the brains of two 3-year-olds. One is that of a normal 3-year-old brain, and the other 3-year-old has suffered extreme neglect. Now, let's continue comparing the treatment of children in the Hidden Leaf Village to that of children in the real world. In the Hidden Leaf Village, children are groomed and trained from an early age, right? From an early age to become and to be used as nothing more than weapons of war for the adults in the village. Now, I hear you saying, right? I hear you thinking, well, but how does this compare to the real world? We love and protect our children. We don't send our children off to war. Yeah, that's right. You don't. Until, of course, they turn 18, right? They can't legally drink, but they can go and die in a war for people in power and be called a hero for killing people who have done absolutely no harm to them. Also, by the way, have you ever heard of Africa and how they use boys as soldiers there? Have you ever heard of that? Or how about Ukraine? Look at this video of teenagers, many under the age of 18, being sent off to die in this pointless, meaningless fucking war that they're having over there. Also, here where I'm from, in the United States, we care so much about our children that a newborn will have $78,000 of debt before he even opens his eyes or can even utter a single word. But we love the kids, right? Trick love the kids, right? Society does not care about children. We say that we do. But we don't. In Naruto, right? Instead of protecting the children, they train and send them off to war. Children are completely disposable and are there only to meet the selfish needs of dysfunctional adults in the village. Now, let me further illustrate this point by showing you what a fucking boomer said on Twitter, now called X. So this tweet now has about 1 million views. So he said, right, I paid for my parents' generation to retire. Now it's time for my children's generation to pay for me to retire. But you want to rob me of it because you're an asshole. I want you all to notice what he said here, right? He said absolutely nothing about changing the system or how the system exploits children, especially his children. No, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say none of that. Why will he go to bat for his own kids? Of course not. He's not going to do that. He's just another adult who sees his children as only tools to be used to satisfy his own selfish needs and desires. And that's the majority of people. That's the majority of people. A major story thread in Naruto was the sibling relationship between Itachi and Sasuke. Now, if you've seen Naruto, you don't need me to tell you how dysfunctional and violent Itachi and Sasuke's relationship was. Now, you may be surprised to know how common sibling violence is. According to studies, sibling aggression is the most common form of family violence. Numerous studies have linked sibling aggression and abuse to worse mental and physical health and problematic interpersonal relationships with parents, peers, and romantic partners. I know there will always be disagreements between siblings here and there. And I think that's normal, especially for children. But the real abusive and violent confrontations between siblings are a byproduct of the parents that are raising those children. Normalizing abuse within the family has found to influence the severity and frequency of abuse among siblings. For instance, when parents model inappropriate sexual behaviors or interactions or condone abusive behavior, a child may act in the same way with a sibling. I do have a theory as to why this violence between siblings exists, especially from older to younger siblings. And I'll use Itachi from Naruto to explain this point. So let me peel back the layers to really walk you through this idea here. So if you have been raised to only learn and to only speak Japanese, well, that's going to be the only language you will know how to speak. Obviously, of course. So if someone tries to communicate with you in English, you're not going to understand because that's not the language you were raised with. The same goes with being raised in an abusive, dysfunctional household. The only people you'll be able to relate to and connect with and understand will be those people who are also damaged and were also raised in an abusive household because it's the only language they know of and were raised with. And this is the case with Itachi. So taking a look at Itachi's childhood, he experienced the suffering of war and death at a very early age. His father, from what I can tell watching the anime, was very emotionally distant and only raised Itachi for his fighting abilities. But there was no praise or love outside of that. So his father is the case for many narcissistic parents. It was all about how can his son Itachi feed his ego and give him status within the clan. Being that Itachi developed no real bond or connection with his clan, he decided to slaughter them, which is just a metaphor for cutting ties with those who abuse you, show no affection, or neglected you as a child. Circling back to why you get the older sibling abusing the younger sibling. Now this is only a theory, okay? But I believe that it may come from the older sibling wanting to protect his younger sibling from the abuse of the adults. In a way, it's like the older sibling telling the younger sibling, well, better it comes from me than from them. Because if it comes from them, it's going to be much, much worse. And this is how abusive parents destroy the bond between their children. And this almost guarantees that the cycle of abuse will continue. The reason that the older sibling does this is because this is the only language that he speaks. This is the only way the child knows how to communicate, is through abuse and dysfunction. If a child does not develop empathy in the early stages of his development, it will be very difficult or next to impossible to develop empathy later on in life. Being abused or neglected by your caretakers early in life could disrupt the normal development of empathy. Empirical studies have demonstrated the more severe childhood maltreatment predicted lower emotional and cognitive empathy. Have you guys ever seen the HBO documentary of The Iceman? It's about a mafia hitman. I would definitely recommend giving it a watch. It's a very good documentary. Now, at the end of that documentary, the psychiatrist explains to the Iceman how he became who he is, to have no remorse and be so evil. And I think that this really drives home the point that I'm trying to make in this video. So this is what the psychiatrist told the Iceman in the documentary. The difference between the people who grow up to be risk-taking good guys with white hats and the people who grow up to be risk-taking bad guys with a long rap sheet and a lot of crime has to do with how their parents raised them. If you raise a kid with love and kindness and affection, most of the time you've got a good shot at their growing up to be a decent, caring, loving human being, treating their own kids well. But if you raise a kid the way that Stanley, his father, raised you, with no love, no affection, constant abuse, beatings for no reason, all you teach is hatred. You make it impossible for that child to grow up to form strong attachments and loving, caring relationships, or to be willing to risk themselves to protect the world. Let's take a look at my favorite character from Naruto, called Pain. Now, many of you who already seen the anime believe that Pain became evil, right? Became evil after his friend died in front of him. No. That was just the icing on the cake. Understand that his parents were murdered in front of him when he was a child. The amount of psychological damage that caused him is on a level we can't even comprehend. Through his trauma, Pain developed a twisted philosophy in which he connected everything to pain, hence his name, Pain. One of his best known quotes is, "This world will know pain." To me, this is no different than the Joker in The Dark Knight. These people just want to see the world burn. Take a good look at this article. And yes, this is real, by the way. To me, this screams of someone who had no bond or connection with their own family. And since they had no childhood, they want to destroy the childhood of others, because as children, no one came to their defense or showed them any love. So they grow up to hate and to hold society and the world in contempt. Like the character Pain, and like this woman in that article who's advocating for the family to be abolished. To me, there is little doubt that they have been abused or neglected as children. This is the hallmark of all personality disorders. All personality disorders are predominantly created and are a product of our upbringing. Children develop and use personality disorders as a coping mechanism against the abuse or neglect they went through. I think a good example are children who develop narcissism to protect themselves from abusive parents. However, the issue is later on in life, the narcissism that helped them survive as children hinders them from developing healthy relationships with others when they are adults. And narcissism cannot be cured. You can only hope to manage it, but it can never be cured. So I'm going to wrap up this video with these two last points, which will bring all this together. And it's probably the most beautiful and most powerful lessons in Naruto. So number one is Naruto deciding to confront the evil and hatred inside of him and integrate his shadow. And number two is consoling your inner child. The foundation of all mental illness is the unwillingness to experience legitimate suffering. Carl Jung. Naruto made the decision to confront the Nine Tails. Again, the Nine Tails inside of Naruto being a representation of the trauma that should not be ignored or suppressed, but acknowledged and confronted head on. The Nine Tails is also a metaphor for the shadow self. The shadow self can be described as highly emotional, driven by primal instinct, often violent, and usually concealed from the social world by the conscious mind. Many philosophers, as well as Jordan Peterson, Robert Greene, have spoken about the importance of integrating your shadow. What is shadow integration? Shadow integration is a process of bringing the hidden parts of the self into consciousness. Shadow is a term coined by Carl Jung to describe the repressed or denied parts of the self. It is a light metaphor for what many others have referred to as the unconscious. Look how powerful Naruto became after he confronted and then integrated his shadow. That shadow self, again, being represented as the Nine Tails in the story. It's truly amazing, truly amazing when you think about it. To summarize, number one is the integration of the shadow self, which we just explained. And number two, and this is the key, I believe, that is missing from the equation that the creator of Naruto was able to so beautifully represent, and that is the consoling of your inner child. What does consoling your inner child mean? By seeing your inner child as a child you can nurture, you can provide to them what you may have once needed. For example, if an actual child was crying near you out of fear, you might choose to console them and provide them with safety. You can do the same for yourself when you notice your inner child is crying in fear. The way I chose to console my inner child was by speaking to him. I told my inner child, it's okay. It's okay. You were just a child. Nothing that happened to you was your fault or your responsibility. But now that I am an adult, I will keep you safe. I will protect you. You don't need to worry. You don't need to feel shame for anything that has ever happened to you. You will always be looked after and cared for because you are very important to me. And I will always love you. The reason I spoke to my inner child that way is because no one ever did or will. Because I am no longer a child. I'm a man. And in order to be a man and take on the responsibilities of a man, the child inside me needs to feel safe and loved. This is what Naruto told his inner child. It was so painful, almost unbearable. I'm the only one who understands you. Don't trust the people of the village. Yes, the people of the village are important, but before I can trust them, there's someone else I have to trust. I'll try to trust myself as the one the villagers can put their faith in. Why? They made us suffer so much. I have come to realize that I shouldn't doubt myself. I need to believe and have faith in myself. And me? Are you saying I'm just holding you back? So what was I to you all this time? Thanks to you, I managed to become strong. Thanks to you, I managed to get this far. Then what should I do now? That's easy. You just need to become me because you are me. Thank you for all you've done for me. All right, so if you have come this far in the video, and if you found value in this video, I ask that you please give it a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike. That's okay too. If you think that someone can benefit or enjoy this video, go ahead and share it. Any thoughts, opinions, feel free to leave them down below in the comment section. And until next time, and remember, you can stay asleep if you want.